On the night of February 10th, 2008, a man by the name of Robert Ross went into a convenience store in West Hollywood. He was then kidnapped at gunpoint and was forced to drive to a home in South Central Los Angeles, in the territory of the Main Street Mafia Crips. There, he was beaten, robbed, and demanded to return Shaquille O'Neal's sex tape. Stay tuned. Let's turn back the clock. The year is 1992, and Shaquille O'Neal roared his way from LSU all the way to the NBA, where he became synonymous with both power and finesse. Quickly, he became one of the league's most dominant players, and one of the US's most popular celebrities. As a literal larger-than-life figure, Shaq also dominated off the court, starring in movies, Pepsi commercials, gracing video game and magazine covers, making wrestling appearances, and topping the charts with one of his most dear passions, rapping, spitting on the mic. Along names such as the notorious B.I.G., Nas, and Jay-Z, the big Aristotle showed us chops on the mic, even featuring on a Michael Jackson single. Yeah, seriously. Of course, Shaq doesn't get a King of Pop or Jay-Z feature by just dunking a basketball. He was actually an adept rapper for his time period, and although he already had millions of dollars, worldwide fame, and basically anything that he wanted more. He called himself a Renaissance man. And hey, he was Shaquille O'Neal, man. Whatever he wanted, he got. No diddy. So it's a year later now. Fresh off a Rookie of the Year campaign, Shaq founded his own record label called Twism Records, with Twism standing for The World Is Mine. Fitting. While being one of the league's best players from out the gate.
Is it true that you're the only rookie that was ever named Player of the Week in the first week?
Yes, sir, it is. I had a pretty good week.
He was also recording with some of the hottest artists in the 90s, the first of which being a rap group called Fu-Schnickens, one of Shaq's childhood idols. The record was a song they'd already recorded, called What's Up Doc, Can We Rock? They added Shaq last minute as a feature, and the song blew up. Coming out in the summer of 1993, it was a top 40 Billboard hit. To compare, Tweaker by Jello Ball is a top 30 Billboard hit, and look where it got him. So yeah, Shaq was hot stuff. It was actually fire, for the time at least.
What's up, Doc? I'm the hooper, hyper, protected by Viper. When I'm out the hooping, yo, you better decipher.
That single showed that Shaq could hold his own in the booth, and many more records followed. What's Up Doc became the lead single of Shaq's first project, called Shaq Diesel, which went platinum, selling over 1 million copies. Buoyed by this massive success, Jive Records, the label that put Fu-Schnickens and Shaq together in the first place, offered him a 3-album, $10 million deal.
Agent called and he said, bro, you're not gonna believe this. And I said, what? He said, they offer you a $10 million 3-album deal. And I was like, I gotta take it.
The next album he dropped was called Shaq Food, The Return, where the first song was No Hook, featuring RZA and Method Man.
The Shaq attack has risen. Roll call 3 p.m. This is Twism. Always and forever.
The album went gold, selling about 500,000 copies. After this, Shaq left Jive Records and partnered with Interscope, where in 1996 he dropped the best album from any athlete ever, You Can't Stop the Rain, featuring the notorious B.I.G., Jay-Z, Nas, and Rakim. For my younger audience, that's like Jello dropping a project with Drake, NBA Youngboy, Lil Uzi, and damn, Cardi. Shaq was stamped in the music game. Just a few months prior, Shaq made the bombshell announcement that he'd be signing a 7-year, $121 million deal with the Los Angeles Lakers. From there, he became the legend that we all know. On the music side, he commemorated his move with the track Straight Playing, symbolizing the arrival of Shaq Diesel on the West Coast. Now, comparatively speaking, You Can't Stop the Rain didn't do that well, selling 200,000 copies. Shaq did one more album partnering with A&M Records in 1998, which featured Kobe Bryant in a song called 3 Times Dope. However, Kobe wasn't credited because of label issues or something like that. But it's out there. I'll play a snippet right now.
I reach destinations with split-second acceleration in a capsule of time to witness your bone evaporation.
When Phil Jackson came into the picture, Shaq let rapping take a back seat. And during the three-peat run in LA, he didn't release anything, recording one album called Shaquille O'Neal Presents Super Friends Volume 1, which never released. He dropped one last track called Drop Another Day Number 34, which started a beef with a rapper called Mad Skills. And after that, he never dropped a full rap project again. The year is now 2004, and the Los Angeles Lakers are losing their groove. They lost their first NBA Finals in the Kobe and Shaq era, and while their status was nothing but solidified, Shaq's time in LA was almost up. Around this time, Shaq created a new label with his cousin Money Mark Stevens, a shrewd businessman who he regularly consulted with while he had Twism Records, which went under in 2001. This time, Shaq was looking to be the executive rather than the talent, and was looking for artists to partner with for his label. Now, enter Robert Ross, aka Stutterbox, due to his penchant for stuttering when he gets nervous or excited. He met Shaquille O'Neal at a party in LA in around 2003, and they became good friends. Stutterbox happened to know a lot of people around the music scene in LA. Shaq's new label, looking for new artists, commissioned Stutterbox to go and find new people for him, and he followed through, plus interest it seems. Enough to where Shaq shouted him out in a 2006 remix of his song with a Notorious B.I.G. That's not all he shouted out though. In fact, he had a lot of guys and a set to rap.
Man, money Marcus Bullet, cousin Kenny is my cat, man. Dog and Box got my back, man. K Slade, Corey Guns, Main Street, Lil Shaq, man.
So, who are these guys? And what's Main Street? Well, see, Robert Ross was affiliated with the Main Street Mafia Crips of South Central LA. This is where stuff gets sticky. While I've lived in South Central LA before, I have not had a singular gang interaction. Like, the closest I got, I went to a basketball court alone on the weekend, broad daylight. It's the middle of the day on a weekend and there's no kids, no one around. I'm wondering what's going on. I see some gang tags, I put it together and I get up out of there, I turn on the jets. I am not about that life. So I brought in someone who is. LaMonte Deuce M. Sims is an OG coming from the Fruittown Brims, a set of the Bloods in West South Central. He's worked with guys like YG and Ty Dolla $ign before, and featured on the viral Brim anthem, Hit Yo Brimmin'. He's also the owner of the media outlet Active Chucks, where he's interviewed major LA players like Suge Knight, as well as our main men Robert Ross and Money Mark Stevens.
Stutterbox is the nexus to this whole investigation.
In late 2007, Ross formed a relationship with his neighbor Ray J, and was able to bring him onto Shaq and Mark Stevens' label, with the help of Death Row affiliate Cash Jones, aka Wack 100. That'll be important later. During the initial negotiations, Robert Ross and Mark Stevens agreed that Ross would make a percentage of royalties based off of whatever music that Ray J and the label put out together. But when they met in New York a few weeks later to finalize the deal, Mark Stevens balked. He gave Ross a $20,000 finder's fee and refused to pay him any royalties.
Now, mind you, Robert Ross is a real fancy, flashy dude. He's driving around Los Angeles at this point in Rolls Royces and Phantoms. He's really heavily and wealthy man. I think he had did a fraud allegedly and acquired about $7-8 million in a fraud scam that he had going on. So he's a street millionaire.
So naturally, Stutterbox wasn't going for it. And neither was Ray J actually. He refused to sign the deal until Stutterbox got his pay, but the facilitator in New York, Kosh Records, were going to nix the deal if he didn't sign soon. So Stutterbox tells Ray J sign the deal and
If I get my money out of these guys, how I get my money out of them.
the project ended up being a commercial success, topping the charts of Billboard Hip Hop and R&B. The main single was Sexy Can I, which actually had Shaq in the background of the music video.
Is it true that Shaq invested in your music career?
Yeah, he gave us, I think, 1.5 million for Sexy Can I.
Wow.
Money Mark, Wack 100, we had another partner, and then Shaq. And we recouped the number back for Shaq in, I don't know, 5 months, 6 months. And everything else has been profitable since.
All the while, Stutterbox was still trying to get his money back. After weeks of constantly requesting money from Mark and Shaq, there was no budging from either guy. So,
Robert Ross and Cash Jones come up with a conspiracy to blackmail and extort Shaquille O'Neal and Mark Stevens for the money that Robert Ross felt he was owed for putting together the Ray J deal.
now hold on. I know that sounds crazy, but hear it out. So Shaq and Stutterbox are good friends at this point, right? Stutterbox even introduced him to other members of the Main Street Crips, including the leader Ladell Rawls, aka Del Dog, remember that, and Kevin Haran, who went by the name of Lil Shaq. Sound familiar?
Dog and Box got my back, man. Main Street, Lil Shaq, man.
So, not only does Shaq rep the Main Street set, but the other people that he mentioned are literally his family. Mark
Money Marcus Bullet,
and Kenny
cousin Kenny is my cat, man.
are his blood relatives, first cousins. And Corey Guns
Corey Guns,
is his godson. But who gets the screen time? Not Kenny or Corey, but Stutterbox.
But him and Shaq was tight, and Shaquille O'Neal, prior to the deal, hung out with him, partied with him, even went to his house where Robert Ross leaves. Shaquille O'Neal had invited his female friend there, had sex with her there, and it was security cam footage when Robert Ross came home where he sees, oh man, he boom, boom, brought on my couch, you know what I'm saying? Shoved his hands all in her ass and all of this stuff.
So yeah, Stutterbox, Robert Ross, came home to his security cam footage and saw Shaq, Yeah, so anyway, that's leverage. This happened around July 2007, before Shaquille divorced his wife, Shawnee. That's infidelity from a global superstar in the 2000s. TMZ would literally be slobbering. TMZ was gonna slobber all over that. So through Cass Jones, Wack 100, Ross claimed to have recorded and saved the footage, and insinuated that he could sell it to TMZ and make a lot of money. Additionally, get this.
Now, Robert Ross, another story plot twist, seeing that Shaquille O'Neal and Shawnee O'Neal were having a rocky relationship. As the story goes, he allegedly played into be a counselor, and it is rumored began to have sex with Shawnee O'Neal. I don't know if that's true or not. Like I said, Robert Ross lies about a lot, but it's been consistent. Even a lot of the police officers in their reports were citing that this allegation might have possibly been true. Shaquille O'Neal hired a private investigator to follow his ex-wife. She follows his ex-wife and brings back footage of Robert Ross and Shawnee O'Neal having brunch together out in, they met halfway and met in Texas or somewhere down south back east.
During this time, apparently Robert Ross told Shawnee O'Neal about the sex tape and even offered to sell it to her. She also said she didn't believe there was a sex tape because he was a liar and he never slept with her. So anyways, regardless of all of what happened previously, I think we can all agree here that Robert Ross is moving hella shiesty. I mean, he did say he was gonna get it back his way. I mean, he's a street millionaire. What do you expect? But here's where he messed up. He messed with Shaq Diesel. Hey, no glaze. One thing Shaq didn't play about back then was leaks. During Kobe Bryant's deposition in his 2004 Colorado case, he name-dropped Shaq to the people who were interviewing him, claiming that Shaq would not pay his woman to say anything, and that he's already paid up to $1 million for stuff like this. Now listen, I'm not gonna choose a side for you guys, but the alleged victim, 3 days before she charged Kobe, bragged about being with him to 5 people. She'd apparently tried to get with Eminem, and her friend described her as having a celebrity addiction. At least from Kobe's point of view, this was just infidelity. And when Shaq did it, he married Shawnee in 2002, he made sure to cover his tracks. Now here goes one of his business partners, who, by the way, had a track of criminal activity, and Shaq was claiming to want to reform him, but he'd also been dropping Shaq's name to police officers. So this is the guy who's trying to throw all of that now down the drain. Shaq wasn't going. Enter Del Dog, the leader of the Main Street Mafia Crips, and one of the most famous men of South Central LA.
You had to hear about Del Dog. He was like God.
Christened the Street Apostle, Del Dog was the founder of 4 Life Records and the 4 Life Mafia car club, the latter of which became the predecessor for an entire car subculture in Japan. He was also tight with Steve Harvey and Ice Cube, both of whom starred in a documentary funded by Shaquille O'Neal. Seen as nearly a biblical figure in his hood, he organized toy and food drives every Thanksgiving, Christmas, and summer, with Shaq even pulling up sometimes. Additionally, he was a devout follower of Christ in his later years, of which he did his best to spread the good word around his hood. Like one of his members said,
"We was cripping for the street, now we're cripping for Christ."
But like every person in power, there are 2 sides to the coin.
He's like a legend in Los Angeles. Some people even call him the king of Los Angeles. If you listen to most people, he was like a ghetto Robin Hood, right? Necessary evils.
Necessary evils.
Lord, I cannot kill all these niggas hating on me, man. That's what I said to God. I said, I cannot kill all these niggas that's hating, man.
2 weeks later, Robert Ross, Stutterbox, was at the Pink Dot in West Hollywood when he encountered some of his old partners from the Main Street Crips. They blocked his car from leaving and told him that Dog wanted to see him. They forced him at gunpoint to drive his Rolls Royce back to South Central LA, where they dropped him off in front of a member's house, where Liddell Rawls, Del Dog, was waiting. Per Ross's account, Dog and some other guys started jumping him, pistol whipping and all of this stuff for about an hour. They then took him to a studio in the back of the house, where they beat him some more, took his diamond necklace, his diamond earrings, Rolex watch, and $15,000 in cash, while saying, Mark and Shaq know who the real boss is now. Del Dog then demanded the tape and $100,000, to which Stutterbox replied, his mom and sister needed to see him soon or else they would get suspicious, but he'd be able to get $60K and the tape in just a few hours. Del Dog then handed him his keys for his house and his car, and let him out. Now, this is where our story gets even juicier. Robert Ross, up to this point, had been working with the police.
He was working with Detective Darren Dupree and Greg Caden, which was a joint task force. They were both LAPD officers, primarily focused on the Tupac and Biggie murder investigation.
Whoa, hold on, huh? Wait, why? Why? Well,
Robert Ross Stutterbox was also a suspect in the unaliving of Biggie Smalls, the notorious B.I.G. Christopher Wallace. Well, they had informants saying that the police did it and the hitman name was Amir Muhammad. Well, Stutterbox went by the alias. Robert Ross went by the alias.
And to top it all off,
the Main Street Crips are already under federal investigation. I'm talking about home invasions, drug dealings. The FBI, ATF, DEA already has federal wiretaps going on.
Which is why this crime was able to be so fleshed out in the first place. They'd already had wiretaps placed on the Main Street Crips. Man. Listen, we talking about Biggie and Tupac on an NBA channel. Bro, like and subscribe, man. Who's really doing this? Back to box.
He leaves, jumps in his Rolls Royce. He calls his handler, Darren Dupree, and Darren Dupree tells him to walk and report the kidnapping and robbery at the local police station, which he did.
Now, Robert Ross's informant situation and motives are still murky, but what is known is that instead of going home and receiving the tape and the $60,000, he went to the LAPD's 77th Division station, beaten and bloodied, and told the officers about what had just happened, and implicated Liddell Rawls, Shaquille O'Neal, and Mark Stevens. Now, was there any evidence other than hearsay to prove that Shaq and Mark Stevens put a hit out on Robert Ross? No, not really. But remember the wiretaps. The LAPD found that around the time that Robert Ross was kidnapped, a flurry of calls was exchanged between Mark Stevens and Liddell Rawls. Now, I just finished up The Wire season 1, and bro, when I read that, I said, bro, literally bar for bar, man, I was shocked. So, there's strong evidence that Money Mark called Del Dog to handle Stutterbox, something Greg Kading, the officer that worked with Stutterbox and the handler of the Tupac and Biggie cases, also corroborated.
Shaq's like, man, this clown's trying to extort money from me, blah, blah, blah. He tells Mark. Well, Mark reaches out to Del Dog and says, man, you gotta swear your guy away. Can you deal with Stutterbox? Tell him to knock this shit off. So Del Dog and the Main Street Crips go and they discipline and threaten Stutterbox.
But Ross didn't press charges right away. Sometime after the kidnapping, he was incarcerated again, which led to a delay for almost 3 years. Then, in the summer of 2011, he officially filed a civil complaint accusing Shaq, Mark Stevens, Del Dog, and 7 other Main Street Crip members of kidnapping, assault and battery, and robbery. From there, the case was picked up from all the major news outlets, with bombastic headlines like Shaq attack and the like. But then, after the preliminary hearing, the case was inexplicably dropped. Why? Well, apparently, Robert Ross perjured himself in court. He lied on the stand. Wack 100, his former partner, and in on that first Ray J deal, claims to know why.
To help a certain individual out, I called my attorney, had the attorney put Greg Kading and Mark Stevens together. They put that together to ask Box on stand if you're gonna pull the paperwork. Have you ever been a confidential informant to work for the LAPD or FBI as a known snitch? He lied on the oath and said no. Greg Kading takes a stance, provides a document that this dude is in fact one of our informants, this, that. At that point, the judge looks at it, he perjured himself, therefore any allegations or any claims he's bringing on anybody is non and void. They dropped the charges on these 7 Crips and let them go. So in a sense, this power roof freed the Crips.
Now, time for another plot twist. Wack 100 was also allegedly an FBI informant at the time, but this time for Death Row Records, in regarding the Biggie Smalls case. What's going on, bro? LaMonte, who's actually got beef right now with Wack 100, broke it down for me. Buckle up. So, for context, after the death of Biggie Smalls, there were allegations that the LAPD was involved in the murder. And not only that, but they hid their involvement in the preceding trials. Biggie's family then filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the LAPD in the city of LA, demanding over $400 million.
Detective Greg Kading, he helped federalize that Main Street case, but that wasn't his case. He's running the Biggie murder investigation and the Tupac Death Row Suge stuff. So that's his priority. There's a $400 million lawsuit against the LAPD and the city of Los Angeles, which would have bankrupt Greg Kading and Darren Dupree. The task force was created to bring up a different theory that didn't implicate any police officers in participating or assisting in the unaliving of Biggie Smalls, the notorious Big. That's his only focus, to bring up a theory so that they could get off this $400 million lawsuit. If Detective Coet would have spoke up on the stand, or Detective Fournier, they could have asked them about everybody who was on this investigation, including the informant. informants being confidential source 2 back.
Now, who is CS2 back? Well, according to LaMonte's findings, that is Wack 100 Cash Jones, who's listed in the investigations while Del Dog was speaking with Mark Stevens. Through Mark Stevens, who is now Cash Jones's employer at Deja 34 Records thanks to the Ray J deal, he wanted to convey the information that Stutterbox had gone sour. Del Dog declines. The police investigation referred to him as CS2, confidential source 2, and Mark Stevens confirmed his identity later on. The priority being the case of the notorious B.I.G. and Jones's ability to be able to point out the culprit as being Wardell Faust, aka Poochie, as a plausible story. If the police officers working on the Stutterbox case were to testify, they were liable to exposing Cash Jones's relationship with the police due to him being involved tangentially, and thus rupturing the relationship needed to have a working theory to save the city of LA and the LAPD $400 million. So they left their lower ranking informant out to dry, and the case was dropped. But hey, that's just a theory. A gang theory. That was poor. That was poor. Thanks for watching. My bad. The LAPD, by the way, had already designated Ross as an undesirable informant due to having a personal vendetta against other gang members and allegedly bragging about paying cops.
Stutterbox is a really interesting character. He may be one of the worst people that I've ever come across insofar as how devious he is.
So maybe that was the reason. Whatever the explanation was, the case was dismissed, the members were set free, and Shaq didn't even see the courtroom. Robert Ross, regardless if he had later legal troubles, lives now in a nice house and what seems to be a peaceful life from what I can make out. Liddell Rawls, aka Del Dog, was shot in 2015 after allegedly attempting to mediate a gang dispute. Mark Stevens, I think, is still living in Atlanta, still working with Shaq, not on music anymore. That kind of died out in 2013. And as it turned out, he actually became Stephen A's agent. And Shaq is now an overpaid hater on national television, far from the gangster life that he may have once dabbled in. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't.
I don't know that Shaquille O'Neal was even aware that a kidnap and robbery was going down. I don't know that. You know what I'm saying?
We'll probably never know, but damn. And if you see any other stories like this, hit me up on Twitter, man. I want to see some more. I want to cover some more. Like and subscribe if you haven't, because more heat is on the way. Thanks for watching. You can't stop the rain.